representing Canada's financial capital, the fourth largest city in North America, and the most amazing city in the world. This is Toronto Business Journal.
Hello everyone, we're here for another amazing edition of Toronto Business Journal. We have a fabulous guest today, Mr. Aaron Weir, talking about a very thought-provoking subject, the idea of Canada and Greenland coming together. Take it away, Santosh.
After completing 3 university degrees, Aaron Weir began his career in the federal public service. He went on to work as an economist for the Canadian Labour Congress, the United Steelworkers, and the International Trade Union Confederation in Brussels. Aaron was selected as the MP for Regina Leuven from 2015 to 2019. After completing his term in Parliament, he served as a senior economist and the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television and Radio Artists, ACTRA, and as a consultant with the government of Nunavut. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us today on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
So we're definitely looking forward to the interview today, Mr. Weir. The way I, just for our viewers, the way I kind of stumbled upon, doing this interview was that I was kind of thinking about, we as Canadians, we missed out on Alaska, and then Trump's putting all this pressure on Greenland. So maybe, we as Canadians need to put our sort of foot forward in this sort of discussion that's taking place. And all of a sudden I stumbled on, Mr. Weir's fabulous and interesting thought-provoking article about the idea that Greenland could join Canada as an alternative to being a part of Trump land, so to speak. So definitely it's kind of very much sort of serendipitous that I stumbled on your article, and we right now have a map of Greenland because many Canadians, we don't necessarily know where Greenland is. So I thought we would put up a map to help our discussion to start off with. So, Mr. Weir, so what, as we as Canadians, have been kind of watching the news, and newly elected Donald Trump has been seeking to quote, economically coerce Canada into annexation. And then we have, the newly elected Donald Trump also seeking to make a claim on Greenland, not ruling out military force. There's been a lot of debate going on in terms of, why Donald Trump wants Greenland. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts of it all is with before we start getting to the idea of Greenland joining Canada. We have a map right now of Greenland and how its relationship is to Canada. So I'm wondering if you might have some thoughts on that, Aaron, in terms of why Trump is making a play in such an aggressive way at Greenland.
It's an interesting question, and of course, it's hard to know what Mr. Trump is thinking. He does seem to like the idea of expanding the United States, whether it's into Canada or Greenland or Panama. Beyond that, he's indicated that he thinks the U.S. needs Greenland for the sake of aerospace security. As you probably know, I make the point in my article that Canada is already a member of NORAD with the United States, so this goal of American airspace security could be achieved just as well by having Greenland join Canada. But I guess on your question of Mr. Trump's motives, I think that there might be some interest in Greenland's potential mineral wealth. Also with climate change, there's an opening up of potential shipping routes and fisheries and offshore resource development in the Arctic. So I would speculate that Donald Trump is probably interested in those economic opportunities as well.
Awesome. Well, those are definitely very sensible kind of views in terms of, why he wants it, the resources and the strategic military benefits he's seeking as well. But I have my own sort of theories. I wanted to get your sort of thoughts on it, which I haven't really seen it too much online, or haven't really discussed it on heard it being discussed in the media. But based upon sort of my experience of background in international relations at University of Toronto, my view is that the real reason why Mr. Trump wants Greenland is that, of course, all those reasons that you mentioned, but in my view, his Greenland is a second. The real focus he has is not Greenland, but Canada. That's my focus. That's why he wants Greenland, because, like we've all heard that, Mr. Trump wants to put troops with the United States-Mexican border, and Mr. Trump is not really going to be too comfortable for Canadians if Mr. Trump starts putting troops on Plattsburgh and Buffalo and all these, border areas, now that he's announced his annexation plan. So if he gets Greenland, my view is that he is seeking to consolidate his power between Alaska and Greenland, and then squeeze Canada from the north through the use of a significant presence of U.S. naval presence and military presence to basically claim Canada's north by extensive legitimate purposes of the Northwest Passage for his own sort of as a shipping lane between the so-called his envisioned state of Greenland and Alaska. So in my view, he's trying to conquer Canada from north to south rather than south to north. So that's kind of my sort of theory, because if he takes Greenland, he's going to be able to put a whole naval presence along Greenland in order to control Canada from the north, and we don't have the naval presence that United States has. So that's kind of what my view is. And my view is he wants Greenland so that he can begin to squeeze Canada and weaken it in such a way that we won't, he's not going to try to take us from the south. He's not going to try to put troops along north of Rochester and Buffalo, but he wants to put troops between Alaska, a naval presence, and Greenland to take Canada from the north, and then eventually, that's, in my view, his real prize is Canada, and Greenland is a military launching point for him to take over Canada through a U.S. naval and other military presence. So I was wondering if you might have any thoughts on that. Is that a crazy idea, or what's sort of your views on that sort of secondary theory, is that it's the Greenland, he's using it as a military launching pad for controlling and taking over of Canada, which in my view is this big prize?
Sure. Well, certainly annexing Greenland would tend to bolster American claims to the Arctic. And I see what you're saying geographically, that acquiring Greenland would allow the United States to kind of surround Canada in a sense, and that would put Trump in an even stronger bargaining position with Canada. In terms of Greenland as a military launching pad against Canada, I mean, I'm not so sure. I think if the United States wanted to take over Canada militarily, it could easily do so with or without Greenland. So, I don't know how much weight I would put on that. But, I definitely see what you're saying, that the U.S. Acquiring Greenland would put it in a very strong position with respect to Canada. And, I guess I've suggested that a useful response to Trump's kind of expansionist idea would be for Canada to strengthen relations with Greenland, even up to inviting Greenland into confederation. So I think it's certainly in Canada's interests to do so.
Yeah, definitely. So this is what we wanted to get into, which is your idea of of Greenland being a part of Canada, because in my view, again, I think that, for myself, I kind of look at Greenland as kind of like, like you have a house and you have in a subdivision and you have that backyard that kind of has a bunch of trees on it that you don't actually own, but it's a nice kind of treed forest and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of look like at Greenland. And I don't want the United States taking over my forest in the backyard and putting up like strip clubs or cement factory or whatever's going to put up there. I don't want them doing that. So why don't, and the thing that's making me nervous is that that we as Canadians, we're used to dealing with the Americans. We for hundreds of years, we have a solid response to to the United States as far as our sense of sovereignty. But I'm getting nervous about those Danish politicians. I think that the only reason why Trump is acting so aggressively towards them is that he thinks that eventually he'll wear them down, and he seems to have got them scared. And I'm concerned that we as Canadians need to put our foot in the door so that we can have control our forests in the backyard to the benefit of the forest and not to the benefit of whatever Mr. Trump wants to put back there. So wanted to get your sort of one of the things which you may want to definitely want to talk about is this whole idea that Canada joined Greenland and the benefits to that to Greenland, because Trump is talking about we want to, this is a strategic point for the United States. He's not really talking about anything too much in terms of how it would benefit the people of Greenland, other than, we're going to liberate them from the colonialism of Denmark, all these ideological stuff. So I was wanting to get into your article first. If you could remind listeners and viewers the title of your article so they can look it up online, and kind of briefly talk about some of the benefits that you see as for the people of Greenland if Greenland was to join Canada.
Yeah, sure. Well, the title of the article is "Hey Greenland, Join Us, Not the U.S." So people can certainly look it up that way. And yeah, I mean, as you alluded to, Greenland has centuries of history as part of Denmark. And I think, inertia would dictate that Greenland might just remain part of Denmark with ever increasing autonomy and potentially pushing towards independence. The point I'm making is that if Greenlanders were interested in joining a larger North American federation, then Canada would be much more appealing than the United States. So your question is, why is that? What would be the benefits to Greenland? Well, one factor I think that's quite important is cultural connection. So the vast majority of Greenland's population is Inuit. And of course, Canada is home to the world's largest Inuit population. The Inuit populations in Greenland and Canada are several times larger than the Inuit population in Alaska, or indeed the Inuit population that's migrated to Denmark. So there's some very deep cultural connections there that I think would help Greenland fit into Canada very well. Another consideration, I think, is economic development. Greenland aspires to develop a mining industry. I think we've already alluded to the mineral wealth that's present there. And of course, the United States is an economic superpower, but mining is maybe the one sector where Canadian companies are actually the international leaders. And of course, Canada has a lot of experience developing and operating mines in the Arctic. So I think that joining Canada would really help boost Greenland's economic development program through mining. I suppose another reason it could be beneficial to Greenland is that Canada has very well developed political institutions to govern and manage large Arctic territories. In terms of population and geography, Greenland is pretty similar to Nunavut or to the Northwest Territories. And, you can imagine Greenland sort of fitting into Confederation as a fourth territory. Whereas it's quite unclear how Greenland would really fit into American political institutions. Is the United States going to offer Greenland statehood? Its population is only about 1/10 of Wyoming, which is currently the least populous U.S. state. So that seems a bit unlikely. Or would Greenland be governed like Washington, D.C., or Puerto Rico, or these small tropical islands that are American territories without statehood. So it's just not really clear that the United States has a model of governance that is really relevant to Greenland. And it seems as though Greenland might fit into Canada and our political architecture in quite a natural way. I guess I mentioned our institutions to help govern large Arctic territories. We have a system of territorial formula financing that currently provides about $5 billion a year to our 3 existing territories. Greenland currently gets less than $1 billion a year in a block grant from the Danish government. So, my impression is that under Canada's territorial formula financing, Greenland would almost certainly get more fiscal support than it's receiving from Denmark right now. So that would be a clear benefit to Greenland. But at the same time, it wouldn't have a big impact on Canada's federal budget. Territorial formula financing currently is only about 1% of Canada's federal budget, and Greenland wouldn't dramatically increase that. So, I think there's a way of providing more support to Greenland without it being a significant cost to Canadian taxpayers.
Yeah, so definitely the Inuit and the integral nature of Indigenous communities and Inuit as far as a forward-thinking governance structure in a federation where there is an opportunity is definitely a strong selling point for Greenland, because I don't think Greenland can look much more to being some kind of U.S. colony like Guam or whatever, where it's just an opportunity for a sort of a depot for military, whatever is going on there, where the people don't really have much control of what's going on. Whereas if the majority Inuit population in Greenland become a part of Canada, then there's already we already have presented a sort of a forward structure, which is embracing the Inuit as a self-governing community, as opposed to just being looking forward to colonial status.
Yeah, I think that's really a key point. I mean, since 1982, Canada's Constitution has explicitly recognized Inuit Aboriginal rights. And of course, there was a big political process of negotiation with the Inuit that resulted in the creation of Nunavut in 1999. So certainly Canada has this long-standing relationship with the Inuit, and I think that Canada has made big efforts to recognize Inuit status and Inuit rights, and that Greenland's Inuit population could fit into that quite well. So I think you're making a good point there. And in terms of Greenland joining the United States, yes, there's this question of what the governance would look like. If it's not a state, would it be kind of governed in the same way as you mentioned Guam or some other small tropical island? It doesn't quite seem to make sense for Greenland. And then you do have a small Inuit population in Alaska, but not necessarily with the same kind of rights and recognition as in Canada. So yeah, I mean certainly the kind of Inuit aspect of this is a really natural link between Greenland and Canada.
Yeah. So one of the things which I'm also thinking about as well is what would Canada potentially offer Denmark so that they don't feel as if they are losing out on a part of Denmark that has been there for 800 years. So, Trump is offering them pretty much, we'll just buy you out, or we'll
ridiculous.
Take you over through the military. So what could you think that Canadians could offer Denmark, which is simply different what Trump's offering, but won't make them feel as if they're severing their relationship with some place which has been with them for 800 years. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I won't pretend to be an expert on Danish politics, but what I will say is that there's been kind of a long-standing independence movement in Greenland, and I think that Denmark has accepted that to a large extent. They've provided quite a bit of autonomy to Greenland, and I think they've also kind of accepted the principle that Greenland could become independent via referendum. And one reason that hasn't happened is that, of course, Greenland is still reliant on Denmark for fiscal support. So I think inviting Greenland into confederation, or at least opening that door, sort of provides a path by which Greenland could become independent of Denmark and join a North American federation with a lot of autonomy. And I guess in terms of concrete benefits to Denmark, I mean, one would be that it would no longer have to provide this block grant to Greenland every year. Also, Denmark, I mean, Greenland is quite far away from Denmark, so Denmark really has to sort of support a totally separate set of infrastructure for Greenland. Whereas if Greenland joined confederation, or I mean, even if Greenland had some kind of association agreement with Canada leading in that direction, there'd be a lot of synergies in the sense that Greenland is much closer to Canada. In fact, we already have a small land border with Greenland on Hans Island. So, for example, seaports, airfields, other facilities in Newfoundland, Labrador, Nunavut could really help provide services to Greenland, and vice versa. The infrastructure on Greenland could also help support some of those more remote parts of Canada. So, I think it's just kind of a natural fit that would relieve Denmark of some fiscal obligations and also of some kind of infrastructure obligations that are very far away from Europe, but as I say, very close to Canada.
Oh, so well, those are definitely great points, Mr. Ware, in terms of releasing some of that financial responsibility. But we all know, for example, in terms of how Canada has evolved and grown from sort of a negotiated process of developing our confederation. Suppose, for example, we Canadians offered Greenland to offer Denmark to retain the Denmark as the head of state, relying that Denmark controls and maintains the head of state status, but the lower parliamentary status is a part of Canada. Do you think that some sort of modified constitutional scenario like that would be appealing to Denmark? So in the same way that we have a head of state for Canada, who's King Charles III, they could maintain their head of state as Denmark, but then they're territorially they would be a part of Canada. Do you think that they would be interested? That'd be appealing to them or not? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all kinds of ways that we could strengthen relations with Greenland, short of it sort of fully joining confederation. I mean, I don't think we should view this as kind of an all or nothing proposition. I mean, even if Greenland, technically is still part of Denmark, there's a lot that we could do to try to strengthen cultural, political, economic relations with Greenland. That only makes sense. I mean, currently we've got some important, bodies of water, the Baffin Bay, the Labrador Sea, where all of the potential, fishing, resource, shipping rights are all kind of split up between Canada and Greenland, which is certainly an impediment to developing those economic opportunities. It's also kind of an impediment to environmental protection because, you run the risk of, competition between Canada and Greenland kind of undercutting any safeguards that either side might try to put in place. So, from the point of view of sustainable development in the Arctic, it really makes sense to have close cooperation between Canada and Greenland. Now, I mean, the ultimate, I think, could be unification. But even if that's not on the table or not fully on the table, I think there's a lot we can do to have closer and more productive relations with Greenland.
Yeah, I definitely think that we've reached this to the discussing in this topic, in that one of the things that I think for many Canadians as well as Americans and people around the world is that when Mr. Trump was running during the election, he didn't mention trying to annex Canada. He didn't mention trying to take over Greenland. He campaigned that he was going to end wars. He was going to put the food on the American table, end wars, end the war in Ukraine. And all of a sudden, after the election, when he's elected, he is obsessing over Greenland and not ruling out military coercion of Greenland, military takeover in Canada, like some persons, like somebody in high school, the guy who's can't get over this girl he's attracted to and keep chasing her down, and like fatal attraction is like psychotic. Like, what's going on here? It's like bizarre. Like every day I'm hearing about taking over Greenland, taking over Canada, Panama. It's like psychotic. So definitely I think all of us can agree that, as Canadians, that we want to respect the choices of the Greenland. Definitely if the people of Greenland decide if they want to be independent, that's what they should do. If they don't want to decide if they want to keep it Denmark, that's what we should do. This is the Canadian view. We as Canadians, we respect sovereignty, we respect democracy, we respect the borders of other countries. But right now we've reached a point where we have a super aggressive leader who is not ruled out military coercion against Greenland. And I think that, we as Canadians need to start thinking about, well, that's a little bizarre. What's the Canadian interest? What happened if Mr. Trump decided to land the military in Greenland and take them over by force, as he hasn't ruled out, That's definitely a very disturbing scenario. It's definitely disturbing scenario for NATO to be contemplating as well. I was just wondering, Mr. Ware, if you have any thoughts on why our leaders have not been more sort of vocal about Greenland, about adding support to the leaders in Denmark and Greenland. Why hasn't our leaders been talking too much about Greenland in terms of adding their support and try to defend Canadian interests? Do you have any sort of thoughts on that? Because I haven't heard our Prime Minister or any Canadian leader make too much of a comment about supporting whatever is going on with Denmark and Greenland. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because for sure there's been lots of talk in Canada about Trump's comments, which are very provocative. And a lot of the Canadian commentary has seemed to be just expressing consternation or outrage with Trump, which is understandable. But my thought is that a more constructive response to Trump's musings might be to actually try to start strengthening relations between Canada and Greenland, both of which have been kind of targets of Trump's rhetoric. And I guess your question is, why haven't Canadian leaders actually started doing that? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, my opinion piece was just printed last week, so I'm hopeful that Canadian political leaders might consider the idea and might start to act on it, because I do think it makes sense in response to Trump, to reach out to these other jurisdictions and try to strengthen relations and build a bit of a common front. That's sort of the history of Canadian Confederation originally, is that you have these separate colonies that banded together in response to tariffs and other threats from south of the border. And we seem to be in some version of that situation again. And so to me, it only makes sense to reach out to Greenland and try to extend this opportunity to become part of Confederation.
Do you have any sort of sense on how Greenlanders view Canada today? Like, do they kind of view Canada that, oh, well, we don't really know that country much, or how do they view Canada, like people of Greenland? I've been trying to get a sense of that, but it's been very elusive trying to get a sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think culturally there is a very deep connection in the sense that, it's the same group of people, the Inuit. So clearly there are some important connections there. Politically, I get the sense that the debate in Greenland has mostly been about independence from Denmark or not. And one of the things I guess I'm trying to do is to put this other option on the table, which is that perhaps Greenland could consider joining this larger but at the same time fairly decentralized North American Federation of Canada. I think that Greenland's dilemma has been that it wants independence from Europe, but it's still reliant on Denmark for financial support. And I think a good solution to that might be joining a Canadian Confederation, because Greenland would probably seek financial support and more territorial financing than what it gets from Denmark. And it would also have quite a bit of autonomy, because of course, Canada is a very decentralized federation to begin with, and the Canadian government has really done a lot to develop.
Yeah, so definitely. So,
sorry, you're just cutting out a little bit. Yeah. No,
Oh.
I just noticed, Aaron, your voice is just cutting out a little bit. Sorry. For me, anyway.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm not sure what to do about that, but
okay. No,
it sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome.
I'll just edit
so
this part out.
one of the again, like as Canadians, the ongoing shocking thing is we have a world leader who's like redrawing maps. Like he puts like Canada, puts in the United States, stars and stripes all across. To me, that's a very provocative thing. And it's a very provocative thing. The only time I've seen a leader, there may have been others that I might have missed, but the only leader I knew that did stuff like that was Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, before he invaded countries, redrew the map of them countries, called it Lebensraum. We're going to take this country over. That's the only time I've seen a leader who actively would redraw maps and stuff like that. Because redrawing maps is definitely, when you do that, that's pretty much an act of war. When you have a leader withdrawing maps. When you have a situation of like, Mr. Trump threatening not ruling out military force, that's showing a complete lack of respect. Lack of respect for Greenland, the people of Greenland, lack of respect for Denmark. It's very dangerous. Very dangerous to our sense of stability in the world. A sense of that's built upon the rule of law and stuff like that. So definitely, what is your sense of, the resolve of Greenland of Denmark specifically in terms of dealing with this threat of Trump? I just wanted to get your insights on that, because again, I hear what they've been saying. Most recently we heard that the Scandinavian countries are coming together. I've heard the EU's thinking of setting this military presence and stuff like that. But I just want to get your thoughts on what do you think is the Danish resolve? Do you think this is extremely strong? Do you think it's buckling? Like, what do you think that? What do you think is happening from the Danish perspective on, Trump putting the pressure, and how we as Canadians can, be a part of that conversation?
It's a very strange situation. As you note, Trump hasn't quite ruled out using military force to take over Greenland. I mean, I don't think he will, but he hasn't ruled it out, which is strange given that Denmark is part of NATO. And I guess it begs the question of whether part of what Trump is doing here is trying to put pressure on the NATO alliance. I mean, he certainly has an agenda of at least wanting other NATO countries to take on a bigger share of the cost of the alliance, spending more money on defense, this kind of thing. So, I don't know if Trump is kind of trying to put pressure on NATO and raise the stakes in that way for other negotiations. But, it certainly puts Denmark in a really weird position as, of course, a close historic military ally of the United States.
No,
That's a
definitely.
great point. That's a very good point. Like he's kind of like doing all this just to get like a better deal with NATO or something. Like it could be like a threat, but it's not. Doesn't seem serious to me. Still, I mean, this is just my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's some people, for example, when Mr. Trump was first talking about, making Canada 51st state, many people said, "Oh yeah, it's just a joke," and then that's what the Trudeau delegation was saying. It was just a joke, and he kept repeating it, and then he said, "Oh, he's just trying to use it as the bargaining chip, trying to and stuff like that," and then he kept repeating it, and started calling the Canada-United States border artificial. I mean, my view is that people who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. That's the old saying and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that anything should be considered to be a joke, and it usually without you like taking precautions to make sure that joke does not manifest into something. Because this is how we get this is how Hitler was able to advance. Hitler's able to advance because his enemies did not think he was going to invade them. We all know the famous thing with Chamberlain with his piece of paper, and then Hitler invaded afterwards and stuff like that. So my concern is that when it could be a joke, it could be just a bargaining chip, but I don't think that if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, and you're a world leader, and I don't think that could be taken as a joke. That's just my opinion. To me, that's like kidding on the square. It's like you're making it sound as if it's a joke because maybe that's just your personality. But I don't think that could be taken lightly. I don't think that we should wait and see what the consequences are, because if he acts upon those, then we're going to be in some serious trouble. But I just want to sort of do you think it's all a joke? Do you think he's just trying to use it as a bargaining chip? Or what do you think, Mr. Ware, in terms of what's going on here? Like, do you think there's any seriousness in terms of his not ruling out military option? And why would he even say that unless he was seriously considering it? Like,
yeah, I do get the sense that Trump is serious in his interest about acquiring Greenland. Like, I think if Denmark agreed to sell Greenland to the United States, Trump would buy it. I don't think that Trump will actually use military force to take over Greenland. But then I guess the question is, well, why won't he rule it out, or why does he kind of keep talking in a provocative way? I think it may well be a bargaining position, but I guess at the end of the day, I would say we maybe can't know exactly what Trump's true intentions may be, but whether he's joking or whether he's just positioning for negotiations or whether he's contemplating something more severe than that, in any of those cases, I think it makes a lot of sense for Canada to start strengthening our relations with Greenland, and to start putting ourselves in a better position. So it's interesting to speculate about Trump's ultimate ideas. It's pretty hard to know that, but in any case, I think the proposal of trying to deepen our relationship with Greenland and potentially invite it into confederation makes a lot of sense.
So who do you think needs to take such an initiative? Does that initiative have to come from the Inuit people themselves, the Inuit, or Prime Minister Trudeau, or how do you see that potentially evolving in terms of a closer relationship that might lead to a contemplation of Greenland joining Canada? How do you think that process would most likely come to fruition?
Yeah, I think it could happen through many different channels, quite likely simultaneously. You could have contacts between the various Inuit organizations, kind of at the more kind of cultural and also political level. You could have Canadian mining companies getting involved in Greenland. You could have, of course, government to government relations, around things like, resource and fishing and shipping rights, and trying to cooperate as well as possible, on environmental protection and sustainable development in the Arctic. In terms of infrastructure, I think there's ways that Canada can help support Greenland and vice versa. So I think that there could be many points of contact, both through governments, but also through Inuit organizations and the private sector. And I think really the more outreach through different channels, the better.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. The more channels, of communication, the better. And I hope that there's going to be definitely a good, strong amount of people that we're going to be able to inspire some discussions about, Canada getting its foot in the door, because I definitely think that the future of Greenland, I mean, all of us wish, that Greenland have the self-determination to decide whether it wants to maintain its close relationship to Denmark or to be an independent country. I think that we as Canadians view that should be only the choice of the people of Greenland. But at the same time, when we have this conversation going on that Mr. Trump inspired, so to speak, I definitely think that we as Canadians need to put our foot in the door, so to speak, to offer a Canadian welcome potentially to people of Greenland who are looking for options that they might want to consider. So definitely. So is there any sort of perspective, Mr. Ware, that you think that that you didn't get to share, or that you think is an important thought in terms of Greenland contemplating being a part of a federation, a new expanded federation? And I definitely think that imagine the look on Mr. Trump's face if that ever happened and stuff like that. He would not be very pleased, would he? Oh my God!
Well,
Greenland joined Canada. Well, he would not. He'd be fuming.
Well, he might be fuming. On the other hand, his stated position is that Greenland is important to U.S. aerospace security,
Yep.
and technically that would be achieved through NORAD. I mean,
Yep.
Canada and the U.S. jointly comprise NORAD, so whether Greenland joins the U.S. or joins Canada would be part of
Yep.
exactly the same aerospace defense system. So in that sense, maybe Trump or other Americans could be satisfied with Greenland joining Canada. But I think you've summed it up pretty well, which is that ultimately the people of Greenland should be the ones making the decision. But so far, I think the options they've been looking at are kind of independence or staying part of Denmark, and Trump has sort of thrust this other possibility onto the table. And I think Canada could potentially make a far more appealing offer in terms of cultural connections, mining development, political institutions, infrastructure cooperation. So I think Canada's got a good case to make, and I'm hopeful that Canadian leaders will start to put it on the table.
Awesome. Well, those are definitely. I hope that Canadian leaders are putting it on the table, inspired by your amazing article, Mr. Ware. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us at Toronto Business Journal, and we look forward to maybe you might consider even a follow-up to your article based upon what you see are sort of new developments in terms of whatever your new thoughts that your article inspires out there. So thank you very much for taking the time to put together that article, and we look forward to any sort of new developments you might want to write about on the evolving Greenland-Canadian relationship that may potentially include Greenland joining Canada and being a part of a greater Canada, so to speak.
Thanks so much for your interest.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Santosh, for joining us.
Pleasure. Yes.
Awesome.
All right.